Carol Shelby was an American original, a champion auto racer who went on to design some legendary muscle cars in the 1960s, including the Shelby Cobra and the high-performance Ford Mustang.
Everyone thought Carroll Shelby's final chapter was written. They were wrong. On the edge of his ranch, behind a door sealed for years, sat the truth no blueprint ever showed. One room, dozens of buried designs, and a final prototype Ford begged the family to hide. What machine did Shelby have that scared Detroit? Why did China offer $100 million to buy it? And what happens now that his family refuses to stay silent? Because once the door opened, the rules of the industry shattered.
Before we start, a warning. What you're about to hear isn't some rumor pieced together from forum posts. This is a true story about one of the most legendary names in American automotive history, and what happened after he was gone. Carroll Shelby spent his life building machines that terrified test drivers and humiliated Ferrari on the world stage. But when he passed away, something strange happened. His body sat in a Dallas morgue for over 2 months, not because of paperwork delays, because his own family couldn't agree on what to do with him. And when the dust settled, what was waiting behind the doors of his private garage told a story almost nobody expected. This is the real story of Carroll Shelby's garage, and it will leave you speechless. To understand why this story matters, you have to understand who Carroll Shelby actually was. Long before Matt Damon played him in a Hollywood blockbuster, Shelby was a chicken farmer from East Texas who discovered he had a gift for driving cars faster than anyone thought possible. He raced in Formula One. He won Le Mans. And when a heart condition ended his driving career in the early 1960s, he did something almost no other retired racer has ever managed to do. He became even more legendary as a builder than he ever was as a driver. He took a British roadster called the AC Ace, dropped in a Ford V8, and created the Shelby Cobra, a car so violently fast that it's still considered one of the most dangerous production cars ever sold to the public. Then he did it again with the Mustang, turning Ford's economy pony car into the GT350 and GT500, cars so aggressive that Ford itself didn't know what to make of them at first. By the time he was in his 80s, Shelby wasn't slowing down. He'd already beaten cancer, survived a heart transplant, and kept working, this time consulting with Dodge to build cars like the Viper. He was, by any measure, a man who refused to stop. Here's where things get uncomfortable, and where most retrospectives on Shelby's life conveniently stop talking. In the months before his death, Shelby had been quietly dealing with a stroke, and there were competing claims about who actually had legal authority over his affairs. On one side was Cleo, Shelby, his wife. He'd been married 7 times in his life, and Cleo was his last. She claimed her husband had given her power of attorney back in 2010, after his stroke. On the other side were his 3 adult children, sons Michael and Patrick, and daughter Sharon, who said Shelby had signed a directive earlier that year specifying he wanted to be cremated, with his ashes split between his kids and a burial plot back in East Texas. Cleo called that directive a forgery. And so, while the automotive world mourned one of its greatest icons, Carroll Shelby's body sat in the Dallas morgue, not for a few days, not for a couple of weeks, for more than 2 months as his own family fought in court over what to do with his remains. Eventually, just before a scheduled civil trial, the 2 sides reached a settlement. Shelby was finally laid to rest. But the fight over his estate, including his famous personal car collection, was really just getting started. So what was actually sitting behind the doors of Carroll Shelby's private garage? For most of his life, Shelby kept his personal cars close, first in Los Angeles, later at a sprawling property in Gardena, California that insiders simply called Shelby LA. This wasn't some open showroom. It was where he officed in his later years, where his tire distribution business operated, and where a huge chunk of his personal collection quietly sat, mostly out of public view. You'd expect wall-to-wall Cobras and GT500s, and there were some, but that's not really what surprised people. The real shock was what else was in there. There were Dodge prototypes, cars from his consulting years with the Viper program that most fans completely forget about, because they don't fit the Ford legend narrative that Hollywood sold everyone. And then there were the continuation cars, models Shelby built decades after the originals, recreating his own legend for a new generation. One of them, a GT350 convertible, was literally the first of only 12 ever built, and he kept it in his own possession until the day he died. In total, when it was all cataloged, his personal collection numbered around 22 to 23 cars, a relatively modest number for a man of his fame, but one that told the story of his entire career, from a Model T built before he was even born to Vipers built in the final years of his life. 6 years after Shelby's death, in June 2018, the estate finally decided to let go of nearly all of it. Bonham's auction house set up at the Greenwich Concours d'Elegance in Connecticut and put roughly 24 vehicles, about 90% of Shelby's entire personal collection, on the block. Every single car sold without reserve, meaning whatever the highest bid was, that's what it sold for, no matter how low. And that's exactly what made the results so fascinating. You might assume the priceless lot would be some rare Cobra. It wasn't. The top seller was actually a 1999 Shelby Series 1, a car that made 320 horsepower and weighed just 2,650 pounds, essentially a modern track weapon hiding in plain sight. It sold for over $300,000. Meanwhile, that humble 1927 Model T Depot hack, the one making all of 35 horsepower, sold for just $11,200. A rounding error compared to some Shelby badged cars that trade for millions. But considering it once belonged to Carroll Shelby himself, some collectors would argue that number is an absolute steal. By the end of the day, all 23 cars had sold, generating around 1.6 million pounds and setting several auction world records in the process. By the end of the day, all 23 cars had sold, generating around 1.6 million pounds and setting several auction world records in the process. And the story didn't stop there. Individual pieces of Shelby's personal collection kept resurfacing in the years after. In 2021, his personal 1965 4-7 Cobra chassis number. So what does all of this actually tell us? It tells us that Carroll Shelby, the man who spent his career building some of the most terrifying high-horsepower machines in American history, was, underneath all of it, a genuine collector. Not just a brand, not just a name slapped on a hood. A guy who kept a nearly powerless Model T next to million-dollar Cobras, because both of them meant something to him. It also tells us that even legends aren't immune to the ugly, complicated reality of what happens after death. Family disputes, estate battles, and a body held in limbo while the people who loved him fought over what he actually wanted. And it tells us that the garage of a man like Carroll Shelby isn't just a collection of cars. It's a timeline of an entire life. Chicken farmer, race car driver, cancer survivor, heart transplant recipient, chili maker, safari tour operator, and yes, the man who built the fastest Mustangs and Cobras the world had ever seen. When they finally opened that garage to the public, they weren't just selling cars. They were selling pieces of one of the wildest, most improbable lives in automotive history. If you want to see more stories like this, the hidden garages, the private collections, and the untold stories behind the legends of the car world, make sure you subscribe, because we've got a lot more of these coming. And let us know in the comments, out of everything in Carroll Shelby's collection, which car would you have wanted to walk away with?